nobody there for Tucson. Ring will take it away with speed up the right wing side. Velarde tripped up, centered for Fagimo to the left circle. A shot, score! In his first game of the year, guess who? Lias Anderson makes it 3-2 with 1:56 to go.
Let's start with the Frozen Four Faber. Faber's having quite a year. I know that we talked about him versus Gronz versus Jersey, and this will probably be a debate for the next, I don't know, year or 2 years until maybe some of those guys get traded away. And then, you know, we're going to throw Clark in the mix, and Clark's no salt, man. He's full on cayenne pepper. I mean, he's gonna throw some wrinkles into the mix there. And so very, very interesting, but you can't knock the year that Faber's having, at least by the accomplishments of the massive amount of quality games he's getting put in.
That's a good way to put it too, because he's seen time in huge games, like pressure games, right? He for Minnesota here, as you mentioned, they entered the Frozen Four. In the Olympics, does it get any more pressure in the Olympics? I guess representing your country, and he played very well there. So, yeah, I mean, I think that he's had a heck of a season. There's no question about it. And we talked about it on the Twitter Spaces, not to get like too off of Brock Faber necessarily, but I guess it does kind of like inevitably lead to this right shot D situation, right, in LA. It was talked about on Twitter Spaces that, you know, Brant Clark, he's either going to be in back to junior or the NHL. He's going to be in the NHL, right? There's no way he can go back to junior.
I mean, the only way that happens, you know, there's two. I think there's another option too. Can't he? If he doesn't play in the NHL, can he be loaned? Can he be loaned out? I haven't looked into that. Like where, like, hey, he gets loaned out like he did, you know, during COVID and played in Europe. But
well, and so I don't know. I guess
I'd have to look into that. That's just something that came across my mind right now. Yeah.
So the other part of this is with Faber, like he's expected, right, to come to and turn pro once his Minnesota season ends here. So if that's the case and he goes to the Ontario Reign, they just picked up and acquired a couple of right shot D men at you know, the Kings did at their deadline. So I would imagine that they would insert him in and they'll find a spot for him. And I'm really just this whole right shot D situation with the Kings. I'm just fascinated to see how it works out. But for Faber, he just continues to be, and I remember that it's not the first time I saw him, but I really took notice of him. I want to say it was last year in this tournament, in the NCAA tournament. I'm like, man, this kid he's all over the ice, right? I mean, he's not an offensive defenseman, but he skates so well and he does move the puck well. And his defensive game is just outstanding. So he's a well-rounded defenseman. We've talked about it on the show. I question that if he hasn't been able to produce yet, to expect the production to come at the pro level, it seems unlikely to me. And not to say that production's everything, but when you have a crop of defensemen that can produce, in theory, right, in the organization, that's why I tend to lean on Faber being the guy that if they do make a trade and there is a valuable piece, like I think he's seen as very valuable. And I think given the depth at the organization, it just seems to make the most sense to me. But
he's just under a half point per game, though. Just under a half point per game in the NCAA. Sure. I mean, and he had multiple points in the Olympics, and he's playing top line minutes. I wouldn't say he's not producing.
That's fair. That's listen, and you look at, you know, Spence is a guy that offense is his game, right? And Jersey has been shown to be an offensive defenseman. Clark is going to be an offensive defenseman. Gronz, I think, could be as well-rounded as of the bunch in terms of being able to do both. So I don't know. Like, is he Matt Roy, or is there more offense there? Right.
Is there also a realistic thing going to go on with Rob Blake and how close to the vest they've had their prospects? Will you have Doughty, Roy, Jersey, and Clark, you know, next year if Walker gets traded, and then you have Faber, Gronz, and Spence, you know, on the right side in in the AHL, and then you bring guys up for cups of coffee with injuries and stuff like that. I mean, Faber could use a full year in the A.
Yeah.
I mean, and Gronz is still progressing. I mean, the only person that's really lit it up all year long has been Spence, but number one power play in hockey. I mean, he's going to get assists when you have all those guys. So not saying that he wasn't a part of that.
No,
but
I like that. I honestly, I think the way you've kind of laid it out, but so unless I missed something there, Matt Roy's kind of the odd man out there because you had Dursey, Clark, Doughty.
And Roy, I mean, it just depends on how they battle. I mean,
and maybe,
I think Clark will at least get 9 games to see what he can play. And if he struggles, then
I would just be stunned, I guess, if he goes back to junior, but maybe he does. I don't know. So, but the way you've laid that out, like it is conceivable, like Gronz should have another year in the AHL. Like he's not ready for the NHL yet. He's only 19, but he's had a really good season. I think another year in the AHL is not going to kill Jordan Spence. And I think a full season in Ontario would be good for Brock Faber too. So I kind of like the way you've laid that out. I think the question is Matt Roy or somebody is still an odd man out there. There's still 7 of them, well, really 8 if you include Walker, who we're just writing off and we assume is going to be out the door. But so there's 8 of those guys, right, of right shot D. So something is going to have to give. And you figure if Walker goes, what he brings back is probably going to be pretty minimal coming off of what he's coming off of.
Which the Kings don't care. They just want to get his cap off the books.
So I don't know. I mean, I guess the way you've laid it out, there's a path to not really needing to trade any of them. I would argue they do need to find a taker, not a taker. That's the wrong way to put it, but a match, because I think that if the Kings are going to make that big trade, whether it's for a top 6 forward, for a left shot D, whoever it is, it's probably going to come from the right side. That's just where their depth is. It's a tough position for teams to find, and they have an abundance of it. So I know Blake has tended to be conservative, and he should have been, right? This is the time of the build, of the rebuild, of the whatever you want to call it. But now's the time. Like right now, they're in second place as we record this in the Pacific Division. So you look ahead to next year, like the expectation should be at least this, and maybe even contend for the division title. And you're looking to make a deep run in the playoffs. So to do that, you need to make that next big move, right? Whatever the organization deems that is. Top 6 winger, top 4 left D.
Do they want it? Do you think Blake wants to get rid of Roy and the fact that
have
so many young guys on the right side? I mean, that's a separate question.
So I think that's a good question. And I think it should be clear, because I know like we throw this stuff out there, right, on our podcast, on the Twitter Spaces, and our articles or whatever at Hockey Royalty about trade this guy, trade that guy. And I want to be very clear. Like it is not, I don't dislike Brock Faber. I don't dislike a lot of these guys. I'm just strictly looking at it from where the Kings are. And if there's a window that they see opening for a cup to get that impact, we'll just say Jacob Chikrin, right? Or an impact top 6 forward. You have to deal somebody. That could be Faber. That could be Spence. And I know that may sound crazy, but like at some point, something is going to have to give here. This is why you accumulate all these assets. So to answer your question, no, I don't think Blake, quote unquote, wants to trade probably any of them. But at some point, you're going to have to figure that out. And so Matt Roy, I see as a very valuable, on that third pair on a really good team, defenseman. I just don't know what his value is in the league, across the league. Like I wouldn't be surprised if a Faber or a Spence has more trade value to other teams than Roy does. So I know people say, well, Roy would just move Roy, but I don't know.
I think those are two different. I think those are 2 different trades, though. Like if you're trading Roy away, you're trading him to make room because you have better options coming up.
But he's too good for that. He's too good to trade, I think, for just to. If
you're trading, well, I mean, but too good in what aspect? Because then, like you said, Jersey's earned his spot this year. Clark is NHL or bust. And then you also have Clark's best asset is him on the power play. Is he going to be playing power play time over Doughty and Jersey? Are they going to run 2 defensemen similar to how San Jose runs their power play with Burns and in Carlson because their defensemen are their most dynamic
Mhm.
playmakers. And so, like, you're going to have a lot of options. It just seems because they're so stacked that Clark is going to almost have to dazzle in those first 9 games and earn a spot. And it's not going to be clearly given to him, which I know fans are going to be pissed about because they want to see shiny toys play. And they're like, oh, well, look at all these young guys doing well this year. And by all accounts, I just posted today on my Twitter, Clark's averaging over a point per game in the OHL. Francisco Pinelli averaging over a point per game, and he won't sniff the Kings next year. He'll probably go back to the O.
Right.
But like these prospects are playing well, and eventually some of them are going to have to sink or swim. And you're looking at the Champagne line is doing fantastic so far since they've been back.
That's why I think that the time is now. The time is this offseason for Blake to make that big move. Yeah. And I don't know, again, Forsberg fits the bill as that top 6 forward who's available because he's, at least right now, a pending UFA. But that doesn't require a trade at the least.
That just requires cash.
Right. So I would personally, I would try to keep Roy. I would try to keep Granz because I think Roy is a valuable piece to have the way he plays.
Let's bring it back to Faber though and how it affects the rate. Let's do that because I think that's a more impressive question. And so if he down the stretch, Reign have a little bit over 10 games. The Frozen Four gets played, I believe, this Saturday. So it'll be a week before he sniffs any time coming up. So, you're looking at maybe a defenseman down the stretch. They brought on these 2 guys that are veterans. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't even need Faber. I've also heard rumors from other Kings creators that if they don't win the national championship, that Faber's thought about staying. So who knows if he's even a lock to come in over after the NCAA tournament, but it would definitely help. I mean, you're looking, he's a different defenseman than what they have over there.
He could easily slot in as their second right D. So I think he could be a top 4 defenseman for Ontario. So Helge Granz
definitely help the power play or the penalty kill.
Yeah, Helge Granz. You look at the right side; it's Helge Granz, Allard, and Nogier. The Allard and Nogier, the 2 guys they just brought in. I don't think that the Kings or the Kings organization, if Faber comes in, he's going to play, and he's going to play probably top 4 minutes, I would say. So, I think he should come. Again, if he says, he wants to take another kick at the can with Minnesota if they don't win this thing, I get that. But if he does,
they're supposed to have the number 1 recruitment class this year, and they're bringing back a lot of guys, so they have a chance to be the number 1 team in hockey next year.
So I totally respect that decision. But if he wants to come to Ontario, he can play. It's not as if this is the Ontario Reign that has Dursey, Spence, and Granz on the right side blocking him. Like this is Granz and then 2 guys they just brought in. So he can play. That said, I mean, Spence will be back for playoffs. He's at least eligible to come back for playoffs. Mm-hmm. So, but no, I think that there's a spot for him if he does decide to come.